Hey guys, welcome. Welcome indeed. We are live, hopefully. Yes, indeed. We have somebody already watching us. Thanks for the comment. Khalistan Zindabad, always a great start to the show. Right. Hey guys, stay safe as well. Great. You're all filling up. Nice to see you guys. Welcome to the show. We'll give it 30 seconds, just give a few more people time to join us. I guess you guys can hear me okay, can you? Can you give me a yes, thumbs up or whatever to say you can hear me okay, so I know we are working? Great news. Now here's another technical test for you guys out there. If you watched yesterday's show, you will know that I had problems playing the videos and hearing the sound. Can you hear that? Let me know if you could hear that, because that's quite important. Because no, and that's bad news. Okay, so we still have not resolved this wretched sound problem. I've pressed a few buttons hoping that would sort it, but clearly that's not worked. Okay, it's not a big problem for today's show, but remains a technical issue I'm going to have to sort out anyway. But I will be, in the course of today's show, I'll be showing you a couple of videos and I will talk over them. And actually, fortunately, they both have subtitles, so you can watch along anyway. Anyway, right, let's get on with the show, guys. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining me today. And indeed, yes, it is another day of perspectives. And today's show, we're going to examine a defining fault line that is opening up in this modern information war, the battle, of course, over Punjab's historical memory. Today, Tuesday, July the 14th, right as we speak, almost thousands have gathered at a place called, and you have to excuse my pronunciation, Harik Patan, for a historic Akal Takht convened ardas and prayers. And this prayer is taking place at the very waters where the bodies of Punjabs disappeared, were once systematically discarded. And this powerful gathering comes at a moment of acute political and cultural friction. And the sudden release and this rapid Indian state enforced censorship that we're now seeing across the board for, of course, that film Satluj, has created, actually, I'm delighted to say, a wonderful backlash right across the world, not just in Punjab, but right across the diaspora. And meanwhile, here in the West, the diplomatic fallout from Operation Hardball continues to redraw the boundaries of state accountability and, of course, transnational violence, as India is trying so desperately to reclaim that narrative. So, as always, we're going to step past the sanitized government press releases from India, the loud noise of the Godi media. We're going to dissect the systemic cover-ups of the past, analyze the political calculations of the present, and then document a global diaspora's absolute refusal to let that truth be buried. Yes, indeed, loads on today's show. And of course, do stay tuned for the end of the show for loads of your comments. So thank you for those. Right, guys, let's get underway and start talking about the news stories. Well, there's a face staring at you. And many of you might recognize this face. It is indeed, of course, Terry Malowski. That I was going to call him a Canadian journalist. He's more like a Canadian mouthpiece. But anyway, I am, of course, going to start by dismantling a narrative that has actually for nearly half a century served as the default setting for Indian-aligned broadcasters in New Delhi. This is the theory of the foreign hand. The foreign hand, what is that? Well, whenever the question of Sikh political autonomy or sovereignty is ever raised out here on the global stage, the immediate response from India, and from the Indian diplomatic and media establishments particularly, always follows a highly predictable script. We're told that the entire movement for a sovereign Sikh state, the movement for Khalistan, is some sort of artificial construct. It's framed not as any sort of ordinary organic expression of a people's history, but as some sort of proxy campaign engineered somewhere else in Islamabad, is one of their standard accusations, funded by external intelligence agencies, the ISI, of course, and of course sustained exclusively by radicalized, disconnected people out here in the diaspora. It's nonsense, of course. Anyway, let me play you this video. You can't obviously hear the sound, sadly, but you can read the subtitles. It's very short. Here again, once again, it's this same old, same old. So interesting stuff. I mean, basically, I hope you could read the subtitles and get the gist of it. Basically, it's just an accusation once again that Pakistan essentially was behind the whole Khalistan movement, and ultimately had the president of Pakistan, Al Haq, not been killed in that plane crash. I think it was 1977 or 78. Then East Punjab would have become Khalistan. Who knows? But anyway, but ultimately, it is a bit of an ongoing narrative, and that Pakistan is behind the Khalistan movement, and to accept that narrative is really actually to commit an extraordinary act of historical erasure, deletion. It requires us to believe that the Sikh community's desire for self-determination just began suddenly, abruptly in the mid-1970s as some sort of creation of Cold War intelligence agencies. But in reality, if you step out of that noisy arena of modern news studios, all this social media nonsense, and just look at the actual historical record, and there you find that the struggle for Sikh sovereignty is deeply indigenous. It's centuries old. And of course, it's inextricably tied to the loss of the Sikh Empire. So again, it annoys me personally. I dread to think what it makes you guys feel. But when I see on social media these comments, oh, it's created by ISI, or it's Pakistan. I mean, what was this then? So ultimately, to understand the roots of the Khalistan movement, of course you go back to 1849, and actually arguably before. But let's take 1849, which then immediately dismisses all these arguments about Pakistan and everything. The annexation of Punjab by the British Empire, the East India Company, I think as it was at the time, in March 1849, didn't simply mark the acquisition of territory by that East India Company. It marked the formal dissolution of the sovereign Sikh Empire, the Sarkar-i-Khalsa, of course, established by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So for 50 years, this was an internationally recognized, highly modernized sovereign state that shared diplomatic relations with European powers. It was seen as being, and I've often said this, centuries ahead of its time in terms of the way it run its empire, it run its governance model. The equality, the egalitarian basis of that governance model was centuries ahead of its time. The way it treated women as equal, again, centuries ahead of its time. But anyway, I digress. So when the British finally annexed Punjab, following the Second Anglo-Sikh War, the Sikh nation didn't lose its identity. Yes, it lost its statehood, but it did not lose its identity. And that is the core of this whole argument. So this historical memory of sovereignty, it's not some sort of modern retrofitted myth. You know, we've not just made it up and then imposed it back on history. It's remained the foundation of Sikh political consciousness ever since, as originally personified in the Sikh Empire. So when the British Empire withdrew from the subcontinent in 1947, the political leadership of Sikhs didn't just suddenly invent a separatist identity. They were actively negotiating the terms of their future in this rapidly changing world of 1947. And during the intense constitutional debates that led up to partition and then the establishment of the constitution in 1950, Sikh leaders proposed all sorts of models of autonomy, several models ranging from Master Tara Singh's demands for Sikhistan, or an independent state, to redraw provincial borders that would preserve the political leverage of the Sikh community. But ultimately, the promises of a decentralized federal India where Sikhs could experience what they wanted, which was the glow of freedom, lured the leadership, sadly, into that betrayal by joining the Union of India. And here we are today as a result of that. But the post-1947 reality quickly diverged from those betrayals, the promises that were then betrayed. In other words, the same sovereign feeling didn't just go away. The centralizing impulses of the newly formed Indian state began to systematically dismantle or try to dismantle regional autonomy, particularly in the Punjab. So when the Akali Dal launched the Suba movement, that was in the 1950s and 1960s, that was not an armed rebellion. It was, of course, it was a peaceful democratic struggle, but simply to align Punjab's provincial borders on a linguistic basis. Basically, it was a right already granted to several other major linguistic groups in southern and western India. But the state, the Delhi centralized state viewed this constitutional demand through security. They said it was a communal conspiracy. It was a threat to India. So in other words, the Suba movement predated Pakistan or any of these other nonsense stories. The Suba movement was in itself in the 50s and the 60s a manifestation of the Khalistan movement. And let's fast forward to the 1970s. The original, here it is, the Anandpur Sahib Resolution, 1973. That is apparently the original handwritten text of the Anandpur Resolution. And here it is actually printed out. So 1973, the struggle, the constitutional struggle culminated in the draft of this resolution, the Anandpur Sahib Resolution. And it wasn't a charter for violent secession. It was in fact a sophisticated, highly articulate demand for genuine federalism. It sought a radical devolution of power from New Delhi out to Punjab, arguing that the central government should limit its jurisdiction only to things like the bigger picture, things like defense, foreign affairs, currency, communications, etc., but leaving everything else to the province, to Punjab. So how did the central government respond? Well, rather than engaging in any sort of dialogue or negotiation, Indira Gandhi labelled the Anandpur Sahib Resolution as secessionist, anti-national. So by systematically blocking every single avenue of peaceful democratic devolution and essentially secessionism in reality, the state closed the door on constitutional reform. And it set Punjab on this direct, inevitable collision course with Delhi. So this whole foreign hand argument is nonsense. It is a deliberate intellectual nonsense. It is designed to, firstly, primarily absolve the Indian state from its own failures and absolve it from its own broken promises, its betrayals, and of course, its decades-long refusal to address legitimate regional grievances as set out in the Anandpur Resolution. So, yeah, Pakistan have historically sought to exploit India's internal fractures, but they did not create these fractures. They might align with Pakistan's interests to destabilize India, but they did not create this. They were not behind this. These are the simple, basic desires of the Sikh people. The desire for self-determination was not manufactured anywhere else other than in the hearts and minds of the Sikh people. It wasn't manufactured in Islamabad. It was forged in those broken promises of 1947, the suppression of the Suba movement in the 50s and 60s, the violent rejection of the Anandpur Sahib Resolution, the brutality of 1984, the genocides of 1984, the long-term genocides of the 1980s and 1990s. Those were the drivers of the Khalistan movement. So by framing this deeply rooted indigenous memory of sovereignty as some sort of foreign conspiracy, India's trying to delegitimize a genuine political agenda, a genuine political movement. But in the next story, when you try to, I'll talk about this in a moment, when you try to bury a nation's history under external subversion or foreign threats, the bad news for India is the truth has a stubborn way of breaking through. As I always say, the truth always prevails. So talking of which, let's move on. This is quite poignant, actually, rather sad. Because in Punjab today, Tuesday, a very important, deeply symbolic event has happened, I gather. It's too early to get any sort of reports directly or video pictures, but hopefully tomorrow I'll have something. But anyway, it's happening today, maybe even as I speak now, at Harika Patan. That's the confluence of the Beas and Satluj rivers. Now, on any ordinary day, it's a beautiful place. Look at it. I mean, it's a site that is it's a natural beauty. It is known as a scenic wetland, but of course, it represents something very different for the people of Punjab. In the historical memory of Punjabis, it represents something a lot more somber and a lot more sinister. This here, I don't know about this precise spot, but in this general area, is the location where the bodies of hundreds of thousands of disappeared Sikh youths, including its believed Jaswant Singh Kalra himself were quietly discarded by state police forces during those awful operations under the butcher of Punjab, KPS Gill, during the 1980s and 1990s. So the bodies were just disposed of in these wetlands. So today, at the formal invitation of the acting Jatidar of the Sri Akal Takht, Jenny Kuldeep Singh Gargaj, thousands of victims' families and human rights lawyers, community members, they've all gathered at Harika Patan for collective ardas, for prayers, essentially. And what makes this event unprecedented and so relevant and actually so important today is, of course, its timing and the political weight that it carries. Now, for over 3 decades, the families of the disappeared have always struggled in isolation. Their grief, of course, completely unacknowledged by the state. The state is too embarrassed about it, of course. Today marks the first time that the supreme temporal seat of the Sikh faith has convened a collective formal prayer at the very waters that served as that silent grave for a generation of Sikhs. And the backdrop to today's gathering has, of course, been absolutely supercharged by this sudden release and, of course, the subsequent immediate ban and the takedown of the film Satluj. Now, this, of course, is Diljit Dosanjh's film, and it is a biographical film, and originally titled Punjab 95. And it does, of course, chronicle the life of that very relevant individual, Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra. And 2 days after its release on Z5, on July the 3rd, the Indian Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, of course, as you all know, intervened, citing sovereignty and security concerns, and then banned it. So, of course, it was then banned inside India. It was taken down from the OTT platform, Z5, and then ultimately it was taken off globally as well. So ultimately, it did, unsurprisingly, spark massive public outrage and instantly thrust the historical reality of Punjab's forced disappearances right back out into the global spotlight. Wonderfully so. So, of course, amid this heightened tension, the widow of Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra, Paramjit Kaur Kalra, she has actually broken a silence from the US, and she's made a very powerful political statement in a letter addressed directly to the Akal Takht, to the Jatidar. And her message, published on, I think it was today, it was actually published, the message that she sent wasn't just merely passive support. It was actually a lot more than that. It actually issued a direct, uncompromising challenge to the entire political establishment. So Paramjit Kaur Kalra has now formally requested that the Jatidar of the Akal Takht establish an independent, non-governmental, non-political People's Commission. So this is important. The mandate of this commission would be enormous, to basically systematically document, register, and verify the true unfathomed scale of those enforced disappearances, the extrajudicial killings and unidentified cremations that occurred in Punjab. In other words, she basically wants a formal commission essentially to carry on the work of her husband, Bhai Kalra. So this is not a request for a state-run inquiry, importantly. Sikh civil society, unsurprisingly, has long since abandoned any faith in government inquiries. Why would the Sikh people have any trust or faith in the Indian state? Of course they wouldn't. And instead, this call is designed and asking for a permanent, community-led historical record that the state can therefore not censor or delete. That's why it's really important. In other words, the state cannot get their dirty little hands on it and bury it or change it or fix it or do whatever. And what's most striking about Mrs. Kalra's intervention is her refusal to let any political faction off the hook on this. This is interesting as well, because this is a landscape in Punjab. And I've talked quite a lot recently about Punjab politics and all the various parties. So in Punjab, political parties routinely try to sort of weaponize this historical trauma for electoral gain. They politicize everything. They try to score political points. over the trauma that the Sikh people have suffered. But what she's done, and it really is a masterclass in itself in holding the entire system accountable. So what she's done, first of all, she in this letter, she began by squarely indicting the Congress Party. I mean, it was, after all, under Congress that the military assault on the Golden Temple in June 1984 happened. And of course, then the subsequent riots in November 1984, all under the Congress government. And of course, the subsequent decade of state terror were initiated and executed primarily, again, under the Congress Party. So the Congress Party is clearly, has clearly got blood on its hands. But she didn't stop there. She then turned her focus to the Shiromani Akali Dal, and she then accused them of spectacular betrayal during their years in power. And instead of utilizing their state administration to prosecute the perpetrators of everybody behind all these acts, successive Akali governments then went on to protect, to promote even, and worse still, to reward compromised police officers, effectively shielding the very architects of state violence from accountability, from justice. So that's the Shiromani Akali Dal came into her sights. And then next in her sights, the Aam Aadmi Party. That's the incumbent government in Punjab today, stating that they too have utterly failed to bring convicted police personnel to justice, allowed many implicated in severe abuses to also evade any sort of meaningful punishment. And finally, she took aim, of course, unsurprisingly, at the BJP. And she raised critical, highly sensitive questions regarding recent global developments, and specifically linking the legacy of state violence in the 1980s to these today's allegations of transnational repression and, of course, the targeted killing of Khalistanis and Sikhs on foreign soil. In other words, the BJP, you're just as guilty in all these illegal acts as your opposition, the Congress Party. So nobody escapes from this letter. So the message from Harik Patan today is very, very clear. The demand for justice is no longer just about retroactively prosecuting elderly retired police officers. It's a lot more than that now. It's grown legs, as we say. It is now a live, pressing constitutional battle over who controls that historical narrative of Punjab. So, as the crowds have no doubt gathered today on the riverbanks, performing Ardas, that call for a People's Commission represents an existential threat to the Indian state's carefully curated story, their narrative. Because, of course, once the Sikh community takes the documenting into their own hands, basically carrying on Bhai Kalra's work, Delhi's in trouble. The state has lost its power to control the narrative. You can't today get away with disappearing hundreds of thousands of Sikhs. They might try, but under the eyes of the world, there is no chance they would get away with that today. So, there's a face again. The evidence itself, I was just going to spend a little bit of time on the evidence that is out there. I want to take a direct, pretty uncomfortable look at this chasm between the official story and, of course, the lived reality of those who survived the security sweeps, those awful years of the 80s and 90s. I know some of you guys, as you've said in your comments, have had personal, if not direct, certainly indirect, family experiences of the truth under this man. And in any conflict, the state relies on institutional vocabulary, words, narrative, to try to hide or sanitize political violence. It uses terms, and you'll be familiar with all these terms. It's all done under counterterrorism. It's all done under the restoration of order. All these euphemisms that the state uses, basically to mask the raw, brutal mechanics of state terror and murder. So to understand how this works in the context of Punjab, you only need to look at an interview of KPS Gill. And I don't think I need to introduce the Director General of Punjab Police, the butcher of police, sorry, the butcher of Punjab, who spearheaded that state counterinsurgency strategy under a doctrine of absolute immunity. So I'm going to play you this. I'll let this. You guys can't hear it, but there are subtitles. So I'll play a minute of it. You read the subtitles, and then I'll carry on. So here we go. I'm just going to stop that there and just replay that, just so anybody might miss it. Don't miss this statement. It renders me speechless when that man sits there and makes this statement. I'll play it once more for you. So I'll let that play in the background, and you guys can read the subtitles. It's a deeply moving film, and I think it was the World Sikh Organization who posted up on their website. It was actually part of a series. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long, and I do urge you, actually, if you go to the WSO website, or certainly I think their Facebook page, I think it was from last year or a couple of years ago, and it's TC, you just said the sound went. Does that mean you could hear it? Can you just let me know if you could hear that sound? Because if you can hear the sound, I will play the whole video for you, because it's really important. I'd love you to be able to hear the sound of this video. It's deeply moving. Let me know. But anyway, ultimately, that was KPS Gill, questioned by international journalists about, of course, the widespread extrajudicial killings, the torture, the forced disappearances under his command. And that was KPS Gill, who looked directly into the camera and delivered that line that has to be one of the most chilling rhetorical assertions in modern political history. Okay, so thanks, TC, for letting me know you couldn't hear the sound. Okay, not to worry. But as I say, I do urge you guys, go along to the WSO Facebook page, and you can watch this video with the sound. It's a very, very powerful thing. Anyway, you can watch this afterwards and read the subtitles, but hopefully listen to my voice in the meantime. But anyway, yes, those first opening words of KPS Gill, absolutely extraordinary. In the annals of counter-terrorism operations of this nature, there has never been a more humane operation than this. Humane, that word, he uses the word humane. So when I describe that man as a psychopath, what more evidence do you need? Because that actually meets, I believe, the clinical definition of a psychopath. A man who can preside over mass murder, mass torture, mass murder, can then say, there has never been a more humane operation than this. And as I say, that tells you all you ever need to know about KPS Gill. So to the mainstream Indian media, which obviously always seeks to rehabilitate his legacy, they see that assertion, his statement, as historical fact. And sympathetic biographers, establishment journalists, still routinely publish articles defending his methodology. They frame him as the super cop who somehow saved Punjab by bypassing administrative red tape to deliver peace. I mean, please. So if you step away from the sanitized English language media studios of New Delhi that pump out all this nonsense and examine the raw translated testimonies of local eyewitnesses on the ground in Punjab, you guys likewise can testify to it. There are countless people in the diaspora who can testify to the truth. That definition of humane just becomes a joke. So if you listen to the actual voices of the people who lived through the butcher's humane operations. The local villagers, the mothers, the farmers, the neighbours whose testimonies were painstakingly recorded by human rights researchers ever since. When you translate and look at those accounts, a devastatingly consistent pattern emerges. They weren't all making it up. It is impossible to deny what happened because thousands upon thousands of independent witnesses have all basically spoken the same story. Witness after witness describes a state of total, unchecked lawlessness. They talk about regular, unprovoked police raids on villages. They recount how young men, often barely teenagers, apparently referred in Punjabi as Chadi Jawani Gabru Jawan, that's youth in the prime of their lives, they were dragged out of their homes in broad daylight and frequently in front, of course, of their screaming families. And then they weren't taken to any formal police stations where they could, under any normal situation, access legal counsel or be presented before a magistrate, as you would expect in any normal democratic nation that operates under the rule of law. They couldn't be presented before a magistrate within 24 hours, of course, mandated by the Indian Constitution. No. Instead, they were taken to a network of secret, illegal interrogation centres hidden across Punjab. So these eyewitness accounts detail, in painful detail, the unimaginable brutality that took place within those black sites. Severe physical torture, systematic humiliation, and ultimately, of course, execution. And once killed, they did not, of course, receive any sort of funeral. The bodies weren't even returned to the families. The bodies were driven under the cover of night to remote canals loaded with heavy stones and dumped into the water. Or they were quietly offloaded at the local municipal crematoria, where then police forces forced low-caste workers to burn them as unidentified and unclaimed bodies, using state-funded wood to erase all physical trace of their existence. That is the truth. That is the exact system that Jaswant Singh Kalra discovered when he began looking through the logistics logs of all those crematoria in Amritsar and the whole region. And he didn't just find names, he found a bureaucratic assembly line of death. He proved, using forensic evidence, that the state was systematically executing its own citizens and then falsifying official records to then cover its tracks. And what's perhaps most telling about the institutional nature of this cover-up is then what happened to the low-level operatives who carried out those orders. Over the last 30 years or more, several lower-ranking police officers who were involved in those abductions and then later implicated in the kidnapping and murder of the man himself, of Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra, they've mysteriously died or suffered fatal accidents or just vanished before they could fully testify in a court of law. And of course, the judicial system moves at glacial pace, making sure that senior commanders are totally and utterly shielded by time and, of course, natural mortality. Many of them have just died of natural causes. They got away with it. Whilst the full chain of command remains completely protected from any sort of legal scrutiny. So KPS Gill's assertion of a humane operation sitting side by side with the agonizing testimonies of Punjab's population, we expose that foundational lie of this narrative, this counter-insurgency narrative. The peace that the state claims to have achieved wasn't built on the rule of law. It wasn't built on the protection of human rights. It wasn't built on any form of democracy in any way, shape, or form. It was built on the systematic, bureaucratic liquidation of thousands of young lives and an absolute refusal to let their stories be told, even today. So let's move on. Of course, what's happening out here in the diaspora? This is this highly coordinated international law enforcement operation. And it has triggered, unsurprisingly, a massive and highly controversial rhetorical shift in particularly Canada, interestingly. So on July the 7th, a few days ago, Of course, a joint 2-year operation spearheaded by the FBI, RCMP, culminated in this series of huge global raids. It was Operation Hardball. It was this massive sweep that resulted in the arrest of 24 individuals across multiple countries, the unsealing of that huge federal grand jury indictment in LA that charged 37 defendants. Now, of course, at the center of these indictments are the leaders of the 3 India-based transnational organized crime syndicates, the Jagu Bhagwan Puria, Ravinder Dandar, and Lawrence Bishnoi. Of course, you guys are very familiar with all that. And then, of course, alongside Bishnoi's close associate, Satyendra Singh, Goldie Bra, as he's otherwise known. Now, of course, for the Sikh diaspora, the most explosive revelation in all that indictment and everything that's come out is, of course, the direct formal charge that Bishnoi and Goldie Bra orchestrated and ordered that June 2023 assassination of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia, in Surrey. So for 3 years, the question of who actually pulled the triggers and who then pulled the strings behind those triggers has stood at the absolute center of this historic diplomatic meltdown that's happened between Canada and India. And of course, within hours of that Operation Hardball announcement and all the publicity that came along with it, there's been an interesting rhetorical U-turn that's taken place, particularly in Canada. Speaking to journalists, the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, a lady called Lisa Morland, made a statement that has actually sent a few shockwaves through international diplomatic circles. She said, quite bluntly, that investigators had found no evidence through this specific organised crime investigation linking Indian government officials to Nijjar's killing. She said, there is no evidence to suggest through this organised crime investigation and the charges and the indictment laid forward that Indian officials were charged or involved, she said, adding that New Delhi had apparently cooperated with this specific probe. Yeah, right. Now, to understand the sheer magnitude of what she said, you then got to recall the diplomatic landscape of what's happened over the last 3 years. In September 2023, Justin Trudeau stood up in that House of Commons in Canada and said publicly in front of all the world's cameras that there were credible allegations linking agents of the Indian government directly to the assassination of Bhai Nijjar. And that declaration then led to the expulsion of diplomats. It led to the suspension of trade talks, a complete fracturing of bilateral relations. Now, with this Operation Hardball now framing the hit as the work of localized transnational gang networks, at least on the face of it, Canada, the Canadian government, appears now to be actively constructing some sort of diplomatic cover story. So attributing everything in that indictment strictly to the Lawrence Bishnoi syndicate, Western intelligence, law enforcement agencies have managed to execute a highly convenient political decoupling. It's basically allowed the Canadian government to lower the diplomatic temperature with New Delhi. We're back to where we were, signalling, of course, a return to economic pragmatism, but at the same time claiming a major victory against cross-border organized crime. But, and you guys are sitting there thinking, what? Yeah, what indeed? It stinks. But as always, it's about what's not being said rather than actually what's been said on record. Much of the actual evidence on the ground in terms of actions, the ejection of diplomats, Trudeau standing up and saying there was credible evidence, all those sorts of things that have happened since 2023 point unambiguously to the fact Canada knows the Indian state are involved. But sadly, this is where real politics comes in. The other factors, the more pragmatic relations, diplomacy, trade deals, globalization, etc., etc. It's same old, same old. And even other commentators have pointed to the fact, interestingly, that Morland's statements, this deputy commissioner, her statements were actually very carefully worded. And they pointed out that the Globe and Mail in Canada, this is, of course, you guys in Canada are fully aware of Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail has done fantastic work representing the Sikh community and actually getting under the layers of obfuscation, hiding, for want of a better word. They've basically been able to tell the truth. And the Globe and Mail claim, actually, her remarks were specifically referring to the US investigation and carefully avoided being specific about the Canadian, the RCMP investigation. So it does, interestingly, still leave open this potential accusation India was, of course, involved. So you see, Canada is actually playing a bit of a tightrope. It's walking a tightrope. It's carefully balanced. It's trying to remain friends with India, but at the same time, it's still reserving its position that if it becomes advantageous to accuse India and present the evidence, then they will do. But ultimately, all that aside, for diaspora groups, whether it's the WSO, the Sikh Federation, and all the organizations representing the Sikh community, this public shift is actually, of course, being viewed with deep cynicism. They're arguing that this sudden insistence on no direct evidence of state involvement ignores all that well-documented systemic overlap between state intelligence and proxy criminal networks. Ultimately, in all this arena of transnational repression, in all the knowledge that we know of what's really going on, states rarely use official uniformed agents to execute extrajudicial hits abroad. We know that India relies on outsourcing its killings to deniable criminal syndicates to do their dirty work. We know that. The Canadian government knows that. No doubt the US government knows that. But more frustrating, the mainstream Indian media has obviously seized upon this cover story to supercharge its own domestic propaganda machine. Of course, highlighting the arrests of gang members operating in the diaspora. They're saying they're trying to conflate legitimate political dissent and peaceful advocacy for Khalistan with organized street crime, drug smuggling, extortion. Essentially, I guess you guys might have seen this. There's loads of posts now coming out linking Bishnoi to Baba Khalsa International. There was a photo going round of Bishnoi standing next to, I forget the name of the guy, but somebody from Baba Khalsa International, saying, look, clearly they're together. Bishnoi must be a Khalistani. I mean, please, you know, I know, of course, Bishnoi is not a Khalistani. Everything he stands for is they hate the Khalistan movement. They've done everything in their power to destroy the Khalistan movement. They likely were behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Khalistani. So to try and promote this nonsense somehow that Bishnoi is a Khalistani is hilarious. So what Operation Hardball ultimately exposes is this cold transactional nature of international relations. This is really what it all comes down to when it comes to Canada particularly. When alliances, trade deals are on the line, the boundary between a state-sponsored assassination and a gangland hit can just be redrawn with a single press release. But the diaspora refuses to accept that, and it will always reject that. So where do we go from here? What are we up against? We're up against the globalists, the WEF, those global elite forces intent on securing more wealth, more power, more control for themselves. And justice, human rights, Modi's murderous regime are just irritations in their path that they're clearly quite happy to brush under the carpet in their pursuit of these aims. And Carney is proof of that. I think one of you guys in the comments, I saw the name Carney pop up. Yeah, you're there. We know he's proof of this. A well-known globalist parachuted undemocratically into government. No political experience or background. Carrying the full globalist agenda on his back and enacting it perfectly like a good little puppet. That's the truth of the matter. So, 15 minutes left. I wanted to talk about Bajaswant Singh Kalra. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I've got another story about Bhai Kalra. Interesting one. And I'm going to show that. I'll do that one tomorrow because I actually want to cover another story. It's a really interesting one. It's a great story, this. So there's by Just Like Tinker. I'll do that story tomorrow. I want to do this story. This is fantastic news. You guys will be hopefully excited about this, particularly you guys here in the UK. This is the journey of the Khalistan Football Association, Khalistan FA. They've just reached a major milestone, transitioning from this huge declaration of sporting sovereignty. You guys, back in April, towards the end of April, here it is, 17th and 19th of April, Khalistan Football Association, in a historic moment, a historic development, became a member, an approved member of CONIFA, that is a Confederation of Independent Football Associations. It's a massive milestone. So, yeah, earlier in April, I talked about this monumental victory in what we called at the time soft power. So when it was officially announced that Khalistan FA was going to become the newest member of CONIFA, the historic approval came through during the annual conference in northern Cyprus. And it was important because recognizing Khalistan as an official sporting entity, this global governing body for de facto states, nations, indigenous people that aren't currently represented by FIFA, it provided this wonderful platform. And at the time, commentators noted that it was far more about than just scoring goals. It's not even just about football. Obviously, football plays a rather large part in this, but it's more about the symbolism of this. So unlike, for example, the pre-existing Punjab Football Association, which obviously represents a strictly geographical region, the Khalistan FA, the Khalistan Football Association, represents a political and sovereign aspiration. It also allows Sikh players from across the diaspora, should they so be good enough or be chosen, whether you're in Canada, UK, Australia, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it now means that anybody who believes in the concept of Khalistan and is a good enough football player, they can pull on the wonderful jersey, the Khalistan FA jersey, under their own flag and anthem, and therefore normalizing this concept of a Sikh homeland on scoreboards across the world, watched by global audiences. So it was at the time, it was hailed as a fantastic step, a really, really important step. Now, here's the really exciting news. This is where those aspirations are now becoming a reality because a highly anticipated announcement of the first official CONIFA match for Khalistan FA. Here it is. The association has officially invited fans to save the date for a historic international friendly against Ireland. You have to forgive if there's, I don't suppose there's any Gaelic speakers out there, so I can totally butcher this pronunciation. Cumann Sacer Gaelgi. Anyway, it's the Irish Football Association. So Khalistan against Ireland on the 15th of August, Saturday. Gosh, that's this Saturday, isn't it? That's creeping up quickly. It can't be right. Saturday the 15th? No, it's not. It's the 20th of July. I beg your pardon. The dates are totally wrong here on my script. It's the 20th of July. It is at the Guardian Warehousing Arena in Willenhall. That's Wolverhampton in the Midlands here in the UK. Kick-off, 7 o'clock. Match opening ceremony, 6:30. So if you are anywhere near Wolverhampton, Willenhall specifically, please, please, please go along, support Khalistan FA. I wonder if they'll be selling football shirts. That'll be something to get your hands on. I mean, how exciting is this? And I do hope the crowds turn out for this to support Khalistan. It is such a huge symbolic step forward. I mean, the cheer as the team take to the pitch is just going to be enormous. Please, if any of you guys get there, I don't think I can make it sadly, but if any of you guys manage to get there, send me some pictures. Actually, I've just noticed, actually. The dates. I've totally butchered the dates. 15th of August. It's the 15th of August. I can't even read my own writing. It's the 15th of August. Tickets are on sale the 20th of July. So the 15th of August in Willenhall, Wolverhampton, Midlands, UK. That is the kickoff, 7:30. So, oh God, what a mess. 7 o'clock with the opening ceremony at 6:30. So all I would say to you guys, particularly, I know loads of you in the Midlands are watching, you have no excuse. Drop everything. Get to Willenhall at 6:30 on the 15th of August. Take your families, take everybody, take your neighbours, take your friends. Make sure in your local Gurdwaras they're aware of this. Tell everybody that Khalistan is taking to the pitch on the 15th of August. And you must be there to support them, because this is the first ever match. This is historic, this. And you can say forevermore that you were there on the day that Khalistan took to the football pitch for the first time ever. It's massive. It's so exciting. I'm actually jumping in my seat, getting excited about this. So anyway, so there you go, guys. Let me know your thoughts on that. And if any of you guys do get to go along to the game, please send me some photos. Video would be even better. I don't know if I can make it. I will do my best. If not, though, I rely on you guys to send me some pictures. So fantastic. And yeah, as you stay safe, you say, I like that logo. I mean, how inspiring is that logo? You've got a Singh, you've got the lion, you've got an eagle sitting on top. Khalistan Football Association. It is so inspiring. Fantastic news. So anyway, we must move on now, because I've got 8 minutes to get through hundreds of comments. So let me move on. But anyway, best of luck to the guys, to the team on the 15th of August. I'm sure you'll win. Who cares if you don't? It's the fact that you're there. The fact that you are there matters. That's the big message. Right. Anyway, our comments, loads of comments. So I'm going to zip through these again because I've got 8 minutes. Gosh, we do run on, don't we? Okay. Surjit Kalair starts us off. This is quite a slightly cryptic comment, and forgive me, Surjit Kalair, if I don't really understand your comment correctly. You say Sikhism is a branch of Hinduism with its own identity. Well, actually, I would not that I'm a Sikh. It is not for me to be qualified to make Hinduism. It is not a branch of Hinduism, but it does share many values with Hinduism, as does Christianity, as does Islam, as does Islam, etc., etc. So anyway, but whatever. Ultimately, then you talk about the Christian faith. I'm not totally sure what you meant by that, but ultimately, when it comes to births, marriages, deaths, suddenly everybody's very religious. Yes, indeed. We call them fair weather Christians, or maybe fair weather Sikhs. In other words, you suddenly remember your religion on occasion when it's suitable, when it's convenient. That's really not what it's all about. That's not what religion's really all about. But ultimately, I do agree with your final sign-offs. You can also live in this world just like you lot, but as Sikhs. Raj Karega Khalsa. The pure shall rule, no opponent will remain. Anyway, thank you, Surjit Kalair. I wasn't totally sure where you were coming from on that one, but hopefully you guys can make sense of that one better than I can. Mastan Singh Dulai, thanks for the information. Thank you for the comment, as always. Singh Aujla, Sikhs and Sikh religion, jackbooted. Again, it's the same argument, isn't it? Jackbooted under Hindu definition. By Hindu leadership, Hindu personal laws applicable on Sikhs. We've got the Hindu Marriage Act. And actually, interestingly, there's another comment coming out, and I'll talk about this in a moment. The uniform, what is it called? Uniform Civil Code coming in. But yes, ultimately, under this wretched clause 25, Hindus have subsumed Sikhs into their legal definition. It's totally unforgivable. And Singh Aujla continues, the Hindu Minority Act 56, the Minority and Guardianship Act 56, applicable to any person who is Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, and to any other person who is not a Muslim, Christian, Parsi, or Jew by religion. It is, again, it's all part of this agenda by Hindutva to try and absorb all faiths into Hinduism. I mean, what were they thinking? Do you honestly think you can somehow subsume all these different beliefs into your own religion? It just doesn't work like that. I mean, it's just the logic of it. What were they thinking? It can only end in one way, as I often say. It's only going to end with them breaking away. Stay safe. Hi, stay safe, because I know you're online. It's good to hear from you. Studio looks great. Thank you. There it is. I'll give you another shot of it. There you go. Thanks. It was actually a dream come true. Very pleased with this studio, I have to say. Thank you for your appreciation. Much appreciated. And, sorry, wrong button. There we go. You want the comments back? Where have the comments gone? There we are. Singh Aujla's back again. Thank you. Same sort of stuff. Article 25. Well, again, it's stating the same old, same old. We do know it's horrific, isn't it? It's a legal battle. Watch my podcast with Dr. Grail from last Friday, if you want more information on this. It's quite shocking. Corgi, the Hindu right wing have always opposed the Hindu Code Bill in favour of this is it, the UCC, the Uniform Civil Law, this Uniform Civil, what's it called? UCC, Uniform Civil Code, this Uniform Civil Code. This is a very controversial piece of legislation. Maybe I'll do have to do a piece on this, actually, because I've not talked about this before. It's another piece of insidious law India's brought in to try, essentially, to steamroller Hinduism, Hindutva, across India. It's dressed up as this, all the law is uniform. There is no Hindu, there is no Sikh, there is no Islam, there is no Christian, but Buddhist, Jain, whatever. So it's dressed up as, look, everybody's now going to be seen as equal under this uniform civil code. But in reality, everybody's saying, no. That now means that the majority Hindu government, the lawmakers, can now essentially impose Hinduism under this uniform. Yeah, everybody will be uniform, everybody will be the same, but they'll all be Hindus. That's the really insidious part of it. That's a sinister part of this, just so you're aware of it. So yes, thank you, Corgi, for highlighting the UCC. It is a very, very dangerous, another piece of lawfare being used by Hindutva. Watch out. Sack hack, Commonwealth problem, read partition, document signed by Nehru. Oh yes, this was a talk about partition. The design and the drafting of partition, I think, just to sum everything up in a simple phrase, is it was designed by the Brahmins to create an Indian constitution that controls India for the Brahmins. It maintains Brahmanical control. And it was written by people, he's right to say, who didn't come from Punjab or Bengal, the two most affected areas of partition. More cross Kirpans and Sat Sri Akal. Sat Sri Akal to you guys. Thank you for that. Oh yeah, we've got this system can't bring across Punjabi, so apologies for the squares. TC, hi TC, I think you're online as well. Nice to see you again, TC. Thanks for joining us. As always good to have your loyal following once again. It's viscerally abhorrent to know that the Panth has been infested by those that only have one genocidal mission. Indeed. Epic self-loathing. The question from those that purportedly follow the same faith but are servant slaves to this evil. Why? Because the people essentially who have infiltrated the Sikh community, we talk about, you guys often talk about false Sikhs, fake Sikhs. They are the fake Sikhs. They are the agents, essentially, indirect or direct otherwise, of Hindutva. They deliberately infiltrate the Gurdwaras, the Sikh communities, the Sikh organizations, the Sikh political parties. They do this deliberately to undermine it, to break it down. There is a very, very clear agenda going on. We know about it. And as you say, they say, TC, the truth is only with the few and the brave. It's not hopefully just the few. It's up to all of us to spread the truth. We need to spread the truth to more people. We need more people in Punjab watching this, of course. That's one of the main things we need to aim for. Sufton muffins. What Hindutva did, they plant persons like Ambedkar and Tara to achieve their goals, and the price paid by Sikhs only. Yeah, it was, the whole thing was, it was an agenda. They knew what they were doing. The sad truth is that the Sikh leadership at the time were, I hesitate to use the word naive. They were just too trusting, which of course is an inherent part of being a Sikh. You are by default trusting until anybody proves otherwise. And that sadly led to the evil, I call them the 1 in 10s, those evil people who are in humanity right across the world. There is a small number of human beings who are genetically driven to want to control you, who want wealth, money, power, name it. And they will use any means necessary, and they will always take advantage of those who are trusting. And that, sadly, sums up exactly what happened in 1947 through to 1950. A bit FPV. This is a comment that I think we can all agree with. Khalistan is and will be the best partner of the West. We know what Khalistan represents. We know it will be one of the best allies of the West. Khalistan Zindabad. Sufton muffins with some more ice cream cones and whatever's, some love hearts, some Sat Sri Akals, some something else. Truth is life or death. Faulty constitution. It was flawed from the very beginning. Flawed for the Sikh people, but it was exactly what the Brahmins and the Hindutva cult, as you call it, the Hindu cult, was trying to achieve. That is what they achieved. And you continue to say India is going to be destroyed soon. It is an inevitability. We know where it's heading. It is an inevitability. Now, I just, as a final sign off, I wanted just to do from yesterday's live show. I did go, as I promised. I went through all the comments, and there's just a few comments I did actually want to respond to. These are mainly, I won't quite say critical comments. There were obviously loads of comments from you guys, from the regulars. Thanks, guys. You know who you are. Much appreciated. I can see you're all commenting online now. Much appreciated. I just wanted to pick these specific comments out. Corgi did actually make quite a few comments, and these were comments I did actually want to pick up on. I did pick up on in the show itself. These Khalistani advocates and the Hindu groups are unfortunately just making Westerners more racist against Indians. This is an interesting comment, and actually it is, sadly, a truthful indirect consequence of what's going on out here in the diaspora, is that Western right-wingers hate immigrants. They hate anybody who's not a white person in their country. And the trouble is, when Khalistanis and, of course, when Hindutva are out on the streets protesting, they're all just lumped into the same bucket. Oh, it's them foreigners. So ironically and sadly, one of the sad consequences of even what I'm doing, it's just more meat for the right wingers. So I do agree with that to some degree, but we can't stop. We have to keep advocating. We have to keep campaigning. All we can do is try to educate those people, educate these right-wing extremists who just don't understand. And then you say, these bits, I don't have time really to get into depth on this. Hindutva is the same as Hindus, just as Khalsa is the same as Sikhs. I believe, and again, you guys can correct me on this, but I actually don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you're an Amritdhari Sikh, you have been initiated into the Khalsa. If you are a non-Amritdhari Sikh, is it a Sejadhari Sikh, if I pronounce that correctly, then you have not officially been initiated into the Khalsa. Now, if you go online, and I did, because that's what I thought, then I went online, and there are people saying, oh no, all Sikhs are in the Khalsa. But my understanding is they're not. There is actually a distinction there. Anyway, you guys can let me know on that. And India will prevail, Khalsa will prevail. So clearly, Corgi, you are an Indian. You might be a Sikh for all I know, but you clearly believe in the unification of Punjab, India, and unifying the Khalsa with India. That is your prerogative. That is your democratic prerogative. I respect your view. I don't necessarily agree with it, but there you are. And thank you anyway for your comment. Abella, every country has human rights issues, and I did address this in the show, actually. I don't know, Angus, slavery was horrible and whites defend it. Also, you can't criticize Israel. Yeah, thank you for this comment. This is an interesting comment, and this is sort of criticism I totally love, actually, because it's a good debate to have. We all have human rights issues. And as I said, the difference between the West and India is in the West, we can hold our governments to account. We can stand up and complain about it without fear. Slavery was horrible. Whites defend it. I don't think whites do now. I don't know if you're in the West, but certainly in the West, the white people, particularly the left, as it turns out, are up in arms, metaphorically speaking, about slavery. We are cancelling lots and lots of famous people. We're cancelling previous high-profile characters. We're pulling down statues because if they were ever associated with slavery. We are actually doing a huge amount of what's called introspection. We are punishing ourselves. We are whipping ourselves because of our involvement in slavery, interestingly. So actually, I think you need to take that into account. And also the whole slavery, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but the whole slavery debate is actually we, the white British people, have taken the whole world's guilt for slavery. When in reality, more white slaves were sent to Africa than any African slaves were sent elsewhere. Believe that or not, but that is the truth. Anyway, that's a side issue. We can't criticize Israel. We do. Good heavens, you obviously are not in the UK. On every week, there is a pro-Palestine march on British streets. So believe me, in fact, it's actually disgusting, I have to say, some of the things that these protesters are allowed to get away with. It's appalling. I stand on the fence between Israel and Palestine. I have no specific alliances either way. But certainly the Palestinians are having it, I would say, unnecessarily, was part of the two-tier justice. Anyway, but that is not another rabbit hole I think we should go down. But what I would say is that is the end of the show. Khalistan Zindabad. We actually don't have a Khalistan Zindabad for a change to finish on. So I will say it. I will have the final honor of saying Khalistan Zindabad. Thank you for all you guys. Thank you for sticking with me for 1 hour and 5 minutes. It's been a long show again today. I must try to shorten it a little bit. But thank you for being there. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks for staying online. Thank you for maintaining your support. It is much appreciated. Do keep the comments coming in. Hopefully this will upload it. I don't know what happened to yesterday's show, but hopefully today's show will be uploaded. You can see it afterwards as well. Do let me know your comments. Do email me directly any of your thoughts. But we must wrap things up for another day. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I will see you guys again live at 5 p.m. UK time tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the comment. Great to see you guys out there still there commenting away. But we'll bring it to a close now. Thanks, guys. I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes looking for the off button. But in the meantime, amuse yourself and have a laugh at me looking like an old dinosaur trying to understand technology. See you guys tomorrow. Ah, there it is.